Thank you, everyone, for making yourselves available. We appreciate also that this is a rescheduled meeting, so apologies. We ran into a technical glitch moments before our webinar was scheduled last week. So thank you very much for your patience and for joining us here today. My name's Matt Buckman. I am the project director for the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service, which is administered by the Canadian Urban Institute. I'll be leading us off in the session today, and well, let's get right into it. We'll quickly go over the agenda. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give us a brief overview of the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service. Then we have two special guests with us today. First, we have Mohammed from the County of Dufferin to highlight a project that we're working on out there. And we have our expert feature, Twyla from Associated Engineering, one of the groups that's included on our roster of climate and infrastructure experts. Following that, we'll do a Q&A, and at that point, I would encourage you to put your cameras on, and we can make it a robust discussion. Happy to take all of your questions. For French language services, feel free to ask your question in French. I do have our French translator right next to me, or if you'd like to ask a question in French in the chat, please feel free to also do that, and we'll get those questions answered. We will have a fully French-speaking session organized sometime in the future, so stay tuned for additional French-speaking opportunities. So with that, I'm going to jump in. So as I mentioned, I'm with the Canadian Urban Institute. The Canadian Urban Institute is administering this program, the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service. If you're not aware of who we are, we're a national nonprofit and charitable organization. We work with municipalities across the country. We do research, planning reports, fee-for-service work, and in the last 5 years, we've started delivering programs. Most notably, in Southwestern Ontario, we've delivered the My Main Street program. We delivered a national program called the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. And now we're delivering this one, the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service. So we are all about local and all about delivering impactful programming and services to local communities. Jumping into the CRIS, the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service. Very simply, this service, which is funded by Housing Infrastructure Communities Canada, connects local governments with populations of around 30,000 or less with climate experts. The goal is that these experts work with the municipality on a real infrastructure project and provide advice, options, to make that project more climate resilient. So a little bit about how we organize ourselves. So as I mentioned, we're funded by Housing Infrastructure Communities Canada, which is a ministry of the Government of Canada. They've developed an initiative called the Climate Toolkit for Housing and Infrastructure. This is a suite of 3 resources intended to support local governments in achieving Canada's national adaptation strategy and emission reduction goals. It consists of 3 services. There's our service, which is really a one-to-one bespoke service. There's the help desk, which is you can contact a service line staffed by an HICC representative, and they can help you navigate programs, funding opportunities, and resources through the offered by the federal government. And that's intended for local governments. So local governments can reach out and get navigated, connected to resources that could make their project more resilient. And then there's the Climate Insight tool. This is a tool delivered by ICLEI, and this is the one-to-many resource. So you can go on to climateinsight.ca. It's a pretty cool tool. Answer a couple quick questions about your community and the types of projects that you're delivering, and it'll provide you with resources, case studies, standards, best practices on how to make your project more resilient. So it's a really good jump off point, even to just get a sense of what high level opportunities your project might have. So our mission is ultimately to support capacity building efforts across Canada to integrate low carbon, climate resilient considerations into infrastructure projects. As I mentioned with our target, we target smaller communities. And to build that capacity, we work directly with those municipalities to develop a bespoke program, how they would leverage an expert to make their service or their infrastructure project more resilient. The key program features for municipalities, there's no cost to participate. For experts, your fees are funded through the Government of Canada. So we would essentially enter into a contractual relationship with the experts, but the municipalities, no cost to participate to you. So the expert access is a free service. The other benefit is expert support and guidance. We match your project with a member from our roster of experts, and we identify that expert based on their regional knowledge, their appropriate experience with asset class or hazards that are relevant to your project. And finally, this is a very rare thing coming from the Government of Canada, but this is a flexible, customizable service. So as long as your project is in a pre-tender stage, we can work with you to incorporate expert advice. So you can come in almost any time of the project, and we can help design a scope of work and expert advice that helps support your needs. So, is your project eligible? I've already mentioned one of the main criteria, which is your community have a population of under or around 30,000. There's some flexibility here. So I will say, if you're like Dufferin County, an upper tier municipality that's providing services to lower tier municipalities that have a smaller size, we're happy to work with you on that. If you're an unincorporated municipality, we're happy to work with you. If you're a nonprofit delivering a critical municipal service, for example, a nonprofit that manages a community recreation portfolio on behalf of a municipality, we're happy to work with you. So if you have questions about the type of criteria, please do feel free to reach out as well. The other two criteria are you're planning an infrastructure or housing related project that is in an eligible asset class. So this is really any asset owned and managed by a municipality can be eligible here. And then that the project has to be in some form of multi-year work plan, needs to have council approval, needs to be included in a multi-year work plan somewhere, could be in a capital plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be funded, but really the purpose of this criteria is having some level of giving us the information that we need to ensure that it is in fact a real project that's underway being delivered by the municipality. That's all that we're looking for there. So to summarize, population 30,000 and below, asset class owned and managed by the municipality, and has some form of council approval. Okay. So just a couple example projects to give you an idea of the type of things we have underway. We launched December 5th. We have a little over 60 projects underway right now. And so these are just a couple examples of what we have going on. In North Salt Spring Water District, we're working with them to connect two lakes through a pumping station, and we're incorporating some climate scenario analysis, climate hazard identification to support that project, identifying vulnerabilities and where possible approaches to mitigating them. In Yukon, Haines Junction up in the north, we're working with them to increase energy efficiency of a community center. They have a community center. The main operation there is a pool that, of course, gets costly to heat in the colder winter months up there. So we're exploring options with them to increase efficiency, including exploring geo exchange there. In Ontario, the township of King, they're developing a new community center, and we're going to provide them with options to reduce emissions and incorporate renewable energy into their building design. In Manitoba, this is a town of Churchill. This is polar bear country. We're working with them to identify options to manage permafrost. Basically, climate change is impacting their permafrost, and they have major flooding issues and drainage issues in their culverts. So we're working with an expert to develop strategies to address permafrost for major culverts in the community there. So to deliver this service, we manage our roster of climate and infrastructure experts, and we have 80 plus experts from across the country with a wide range of disciplines. We have, I would say, a strength in water-related expertise as well as in buildings. That being said, if your project is very niche and we don't have the expertise on our roster, we do have the flexibility to find the right person. So with our initial base of experts, I'm confident that we'd be able to tackle any project that comes our way. If there's anything more niche, then we would go out and find it for you. Okay. So in terms of how to actually get access to the service for municipality, it's very simple. We have a website, climatereadycanada.ca. You can register your project with us there. You basically submit a service request. This is very different from other programs. This isn't really a competitive program. It's not like a full grant application that you're putting in. We use the terminology service request. So really, if you put in a service request, which is really tell us a little bit about your community, a little bit about your project, and how you might expect to use an expert. With that, we'll work with you to define a scope of work. We'll match the appropriate expert to your project. And then that expert will start working with you to give you the support you need on that project. So with that, I would encourage everyone, if you have a project in mind, to register it at climatereadycanada.ca. And before we get there, I will hand it over to Mohammed to talk a little bit about the project that we're working on in the county of Dufferin.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed, and I am Dufferin County's Corporate Climate Initiative Coordinator. So basically, my responsibility is coordinating, implementing, and tracking sustainability initiative with a focus on climate and energy-related projects for county assets, which are predominantly county-owned buildings and our fleet. And I was going to attest to the fact that Matt was alluding to there about the simplicity of the application process. So from our own experience, basically the majority of the work will be you just trying to figure out which project you want to use their services for. The application process itself, which is like the submission of the online form, took us about an hour to complete. But basically, majority of our time was just trying to figure out which project we would want their services for. And I can kind of get into a little bit of the description of what the project is about. So internally, we like to kind of play with the names we give our project. So for this project, we are branding it Assured Charge Dufferin County. And the synonym for that is ACDC. So basically, the project is about conducting a feasibility study to assess the potential of installing new battery backup system or replacing existing backup generators with battery solid solutions. So this, the goal here is to enhance the climate resiliency of county-owned building And the study will evaluate the technical feasibility, the cost effectiveness, and the potential benefits, such as improved energy security and reduced greenhouse gases and long-term operational savings from switching from the um, diesel or natural gas for battery backup system to battery backup system. This is in line with the climate adaptation strategy that the county adopted in 2023. And also, we kind of like have an internal tool that we use to evaluate our approach to any kind of like service we provide or any project we want to take on, which we call the climate and equity tool. So this kind of like help us in making decisions that are going to be beneficial climate-wise and also push forward equity. And while using that tool, it kind of like helped us with like prioritizing which buildings we can include in this project in terms of like the impact it will kind of have on our community. Basically, through that process, we're able to make a decision of which community housing buildings that we would like to include in the study based on the kind of people we serve in those buildings. Um, yeah, like I said, the application process was very seamless. It was easy, very straightforward. It took an hour to complete. And basically, it took the time it took for for Matt and his colleague to get back to us was very quick as well. I think it was like a um, 2-day period, and they were able to like get back to us. And basically, we were told that our application was successful and accepted. And after that, we kind of like held an intake meeting where we were able to like discuss the scope of work for this study. And after that meeting, they were able to like put together a draft scope of work, which we kind of like reviewed internally and sent back to them. And I think the next step for us now is just kind of like finish up the scope of work and send that out to the list of experts that they have and kind of like see who will be willing to kind of like help us complete this study.
Exactly right. Thank you, Mohammed. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so our process, as I mentioned, is intended to be super bespoke, which means it's pretty high touch. So when projects come in, once you fill out that form, we can respond very quickly, and we'll set up an intake meeting with you, hear about your project and its challenges and opportunities in your own words, and then we start working on developing a scope and matching you with the right expert. So tended to be very simple, and we're really looking forward to moving that project forward in Dufferin County. It's exciting, and it's one of the few ones that really has an impact on affordable housing, community housing opportunities. So really pleased to highlight that here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if I might add, basically this is like project that we have a plan on completing in the nearest future, but currently we did not have the budget nor the resources to actually do it right now. So the help that we're getting from CRIS is basically fast tracking the process of making our buildings more climate resilient. So instead of like waiting till 2026 or 2027 down the line, we are able to like just bring forward that project and actually start with the implementation of that kind of like thought process or idea in our building. So yeah, we are really glad and grateful for the services you guys are providing.
Awesome. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you so much for being able to join, and looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Yeah, same here.
Awesome. Next up, we have Twyla from Associated Engineering. So Twyla represents Associated Engineering, one of the larger firms that are included on our expert roster. So Twyla, over to you. Talk about the services that Associated Engineering provides, and yeah.
Okay. Oh, my view changes. Can you see screen? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So just quickly, Associated Engineering, we primarily work with municipalities. We work across Canada. We're a Canadian company, employee owned. The piece just to point out here is, so I manage our strategic advisory services group, and I am discipline lead for climate resilience. Through our other departments, I do a lot of coordination of pulling in the right technical expertise for different types of projects. So we work quite nimble. Same thing, I get pulled into other engineering projects and environmental projects and bring that climate resilience lens as well. A piece here just to note, for some companies, there's a new credential that you'll see, an IRP is an infrastructure resilience professional through the Climate Risk Institute. So myself and another person in the organization as well has that. So you'll see a lot of people getting trained and kind of getting into that credential. And my intent here today, if it'll advance, is just to give some ideas of different types of things you might do as part of this project. So I'm going to focus more on climate resilience. We're supporting the Haines Junction project, which is primarily climate mitigation energy focused, but there is a climate risk piece we can quickly go in and kind of help as well. So this is just to plant a seed. So for some communities, pulling together and compiling climate projections, a lot of information is online now that you need. There are a few unique hazards like wind or fire that there are different sources we pull that information from, so we can compile some of that. But we do some work on helping to communicate. So how do you communicate some of this to your citizens, to the public? So we're seeing different ways that we can support some of the communication pieces as well. Climate risk assessments, there's quite a lot of this going on across the industry. The key thing I want to point out here that I'll kind of get into is it can be applied at very different scales and different levels of detail. So an example here is one we've done for, it's actually a new police indoor firing range, but a specific project scale. So we can look at that building and break it apart in terms of the types of assets. We also usually look at the natural environment or landscaping. This did not have an environmental component. And then we also look at the social element and the users of the facility. So we would look at the likelihood is where of a hazard occurring is where the climate projections come in. So we do that. It's pretty quick for us. And the consequences, it's usually talked through with yourselves locally in a bit of a workshop. And then that helps you target some of your actions because you may not be able to afford and address every impact from climate, but this helps you really understand the key things that are worth focusing on. We've also done some work at a portfolio scale. So this is one of a few examples we have around, this is specific to facilities. So we did kind of an adapted vulnerability assessment, not a full climate risk assessment on every facility, but we identified key indicators that would help us we could quickly identify for each facility. And that helped us build them an initial plan for key adaptation actions. We created these report cards for every facility. And from that, they've started to plan out their costing over the next 2-3 business cycles. Another point to point out, we do community-wide climate risk assessments. Within the scope of this project, that might be within the budget of what you can do is a risk assessment for a community. Or if you have one already established, I would say that the specific action planning and implementation planning can take about the same amount of effort as the risk assessment. So for some of you that have a risk assessment in place, we can work with you and stakeholders to go through and really build a bunch of your actions. We do a lot of prioritization of actions using a high level cost benefit, and we get into how does it link to existing initiatives that are happening and other things like that. And then again, getting it into a public kind of format so you can share it with the community. Other things you can think about is emergency response planning. So this is one we've done for Canmore, which is near Banff, so just on the edge of the mountains. But this one is looking at heat and smoke specifically. And so we were looking at things like walking distance and how often to integrate shade. There was an equity piece to this because there's a lot of tourism, but there's also residents. And so there was a balance of where to put these emergency measures like water to balance residents, but as well as tourism. And then we also built guidelines for how to increase some of the features you might need to have a cooling and heat center for emergencies. So there's some guidelines there. And then we get into things like data visualization. So in asset management, we're starting to integrate climate adaptation into asset management. This is one we did for a suite of facilities portfolio. And then using things like Power BI, you can start to pull out very different insights. We can start to look at what are the things that are worth doing as a retrofit versus that replacement. So we use some visualizations there. We also get into things like natural asset inventory. So starting to think of natural assets like wetlands and forests and riparian as an asset and managing it the same way as your built assets. And so using things like visualization of inventory, again, it gets into that communication. We do some of that as well. So that's quite a few things, but hopefully planting a few seeds there. I have just a couple insights from ourselves. It's been absolutely a great experience to work with CUI on this project or this program. I would say a couple insights from our side. It's really helpful to be very clear on your project outcomes and then be open to if the approach adapts a little bit. It's really great to have an approach where the initial scope comes in and there's an ability for the consultant to look at it and have some back and forth and kind of suggestions of how to approach it. So it's in order to do that, which is really helpful, is making sure those outcomes are clear. Another thing we see is being cautious about the number of deliverables. So we can absolutely have touch points that are more at a meeting and we can share results. And that tends to be a lot more efficient in order for you to have one deliverable at the end. And that really helps save some of your budget to make sure that you're putting it on the analysis. Also, sometimes it'll be a mix of quantitative and qualitative. So again, depending on the scope, you'll see some recommendations of different ways you can approach it. And a key thing I'd like to drive home is the co-benefits piece. You know, there's oftentimes, if you're doing an energy project, there could be a resilience piece, an adaptation piece you could put in, as well as the other way around. So I think from where we're coming from, we're always trying to find where we can make those connections. So those are just a couple thoughts, but also thank you to CUI. You guys have been great to organize it, and I think it's a great program.
Thank you so much, Twyla, and really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And yeah, and working with you has been fantastic. So really all this to say, Associated Engineering, one of our many roster experts, we have lots of experts that can support you on your project, whether it's resilience, mitigation, or even very niche expertise, particulate matter. We have all kinds of experts that are able to support you on your project. So thank you again, Twyla, for joining us and presenting here. I'm now going to call up my partner in crime, Sadhu Johnston. He's on here. Sadhu is our climate expert co-lead, former city manager of the city of Vancouver, and he's been instrumental in helping us design and deliver this program. I'm just going to bring him out here as we open it up for the Q&A session. Sadhu's going to help me answer some of these questions. So with that, everyone feel free to put cameras on. In fact, I would encourage you to put cameras on, and we'd love to hear what your initial thoughts are here, what projects you might imagine submitting to the service, and how you might see yourself benefiting from this, or any questions about the technical approaches to this initiative. I have one hand up. Wally.
Thanks, Matt. You and I spoke last week. I was executive director for Asset Management BC for 15 years till I moved to Saskatoon. We have been, at the request of Infrastructure Canada, and you and I spoke about this, of talking to a number of communities on projects. I identified a couple, but one in particular, I just want to be sure that is adequate. It's a bedroom community, population in excess of 20,000. A lot of housing initiatives right now. It's giving them real challenges. We got an excellent CAO who actually came from West Kelowna in BC. And they are about to undertake, and it's been funded by council, a master drainage plan. And she asked me, and I said, that to me makes a lot of sense, to build climate change into doing that for the municipality. Is that an eligible project? It is funded through council. It is not yet a capital project, but it's certainly going to lead to a lot of capital projects. And to me, it's an awful lot better. And as I say, we preached climate change for almost a decade and natural assets. I've worked with municipal natural or natural assets initiative with Roy Brooks now for probably 10 years, since he developed his work, and AMBC has helped him an awful lot with that. That's one of the projects we have identified as a possibility. Is it qualify?
So I think that would be a little bit of a gray area for us. So the question there is really our initiative is focused on a specific infrastructure project, and we're not designed to support community-wide studies. However, if we were to hone in on a specific example within that municipal drainage plan, we could probably, a specific location, we could probably work with that.
Okay, we could do that, but doesn't it make sense to bring climate change and mitigation strategies and so forth when you're developing your plan as to what you really want to do and developing your capital works? Other than wait till you got a specific project, you should have your guidelines and directions as to making sure that you built this in. Geographically, it's not a large community, but it is still got a fair amount of rural area, and they are developing quickly. And I'm just wondering if yes, we could hone in on a particular project, but then that could be used, I suppose, as an example to go municipality wide. But it to me makes an awful lot of sense to build that in to the planning stage when you're identifying your projects and what they should look like.
Yeah, it's really about what we are set up and funded to do.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I work with CRIS and Infrastructure Canada.
Yeah.
And was on one of their funding committees for 8 years, so I fully understand the contract with INFC.
So if you'd like, Wally, feel free to send us more information.
Okay.
We are, through the course of this program, we have been very flexible, and we try to find a way to work with every community that comes to us. So,
well, I think just taking your words and knowing about grant applications and contracts, I think we could find some 1 or 2 specific projects where there is core drainage issues right now within the municipality. Use those as a basis to really identify how you would look at other projects within the context of the plan, other than within the plan itself.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Wally. Jean-Sebastian.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity that you gave us today. It was very interesting and educating. I was wondering, the presenter just before, she was speaking about climate plans and emergency planning, but for what you told us, it doesn't seem to go within the scope of the program. Am I right?
So essentially what we do is we try and scale down those resources to the needs of the project. So we're operating at the project level. So when it comes to resilience planning, a lot of what we'll do is really focused on identifying hazards, climate hazards for the project, and options to mitigate those hazards at the project level.
All right. And so, how does how does the scope of those projects go? It's like, do your expert make like engineering plans, or do they modify like existing to which extent does the help go?
Yes. So they're essentially, what the expert is doing is providing advisory services. So they're developing options that would then need to be further investigated by the municipality. So they'll give you a suite of options that would make your project more resilient, some key considerations with each of those options. What they're not going to do is provide, stamped, detailed designed drawings. They're not going to go to that level. But they will give you enough information that you would know if you wanted to pursue an option, how you might get started on pursuing it.
Could they review like existing document that we, for example, if we had already like a new development that is planned and we have like issues with for example, what Wally says, like drainage, and how we're not sure which solution to find, could they like review like those documents and give us like maybe new options that we haven't seen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, that's, the more information that you have on your project, the better it is for the expert.
Yeah, that could be something that could be interesting for us.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I know we also have, there's some familiar names here that I see, including experts that are on our roster. I don't know if anyone has a project they'd like to talk about that they've come across and how they might be able to incorporate our services into their project.
Hey, Matt, this is Sadhu. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Sadhu. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just jump in just to
Please.
say, I've been in part of many conversations with communities with submissions into the roster, and we have never turned one away. So, I think the point that you mentioned earlier about it being a bespoke service, I just really want to reiterate that to people. We do have guidelines, but every community that's come in the door, we've pretty much found a way to work with and found ways to support them. So I would, if you're looking for some kind of support, you're pursuing a project, put a submission in. We'll sit down and get on a call with you and talk about what your needs are and how we might be able to help, or what kind of experts there are out there that might be able to help, how best to frame the project to meet our requirements. So, I would really encourage people, if you've got a possible project, put it in there and we'll get on a call and work through it together. It doesn't need to be perfect. This is not like a grant process where it's approved or not approved. This is a submission process. We'll look at your submission form and we'll get on a call and say, okay, here's how we think we can make this work.
Thanks, Sadhu. Yeah, appreciate that. And that's true. Every project that's come in, nobody's been turned away so far. So we'll find a way to work with you.
And if I might add, this is based on the conversations we've had with CRIS earlier, like weeks ago. So basically, this is not like a one-time application kind of thing. So basically, you can kind of like submit some multiple applications for your services. Is that correct?
Sorry, the question is the question is how
Multiple
projects get
applications,
in.
okay.
At this stage, I would say if you can't decide what project you'd like to work on us with, give a brief description in your submission of your whatever it is, your top 5 projects. And to Sadhu's point, we'll talk with you and we'll pick one to start, and we'll design an approach to help that project move forward. But yeah, I think if you can't decide which single project you'd like to work on, feel free to submit a bunch, and we'll help you figure out which one best suits the services and support that we can provide.
Yeah, the twist to that could be just doing multiple submissions as well. Like if you get on there and the form doesn't seem right for 2 different types of you could do multiple submissions and we'll sit down and talk with you about them.
Yeah.
In unique instances, we've done multiple projects with one community because there was a really good alignment and the expert were lined up. And so it may be that we would do multiple projects if they fall under the funding threshold. So there's different ways that we can work together, and I wouldn't be shy about putting in multiple submissions, and we can talk through it with you to figure out the best fit.
Yeah. I just want to go to a quick question in the chat, whether or not the services can be provided to regional government entities. So we do work with regional governments and in Ontario, upper tier municipalities. The only key piece that we look for is that the project is specifically in service of a lower tier community or municipality. So, I feel like we have a project in, I want to say, Sunshine Coast Regional District that's benefiting a lower tier municipality with a population of sub 30,000, and that's generally how we'll work with regional governments. Jean-Sebastien, one more time.
Yeah, it's me again. Just to know, what is the budget of the total budget that you have for this program, and is it a recurring budget or it's like a one time? And how does this program work in general? And the follow-up question would be like, is it available in Quebec? Like normally, like those projects, it's always complicated to get like funding in Quebec. So I just wanted to make sure that there's no issue about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It is available in Quebec, so that's an easy answer to that one. The envelope that we generally provide to projects is around $20,000, and it can be north of that, where to Sadhu's point, where the project is, where the project either supports greater capacity building, or there's great alignment and efficiencies in adding on a second project. So really everything with this program is quite bespoke. That's the general envelope.
Yeah, and just
is it recurring?
Yeah, this is a 4-year program. So and we're doing rolling intakes, and so it's a 4-year program. Depending on how much money we use this year to finish up projects from last year, it's probably about $3 million of projects to go out this year in that range. Is that right, Matt?
That's about right. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Wally.
Yeah, thank you. Just a clarification on what you said respecting regional governments. There is a unique kind of local government in BC. It is not a municipality, but it's a local government called our regional municipalities, and they do directly deliver services. The real question, the reason they're called not called municipalities, is because they have a board, not a council, because it's both direct and indirect elected. But I would think that they should be eligible because they directly do services. They do not do roads, but an awful lot of them do transit, water, sewer directly for some of the constituent municipalities or electoral areas within those districts. So I'm just hoping that you're open to seeing the word regional municipality.
Oh, yes.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they don't deliver services directly, because they do. Sandhu will know that because he'll know about our regional municipalities in BC. I got corrected when I was there calling them municipalities, and I was told I had just eliminated about 26 local governments by doing that. So I now no longer refer to BC communities as municipalities, all local governments.
Yeah, just to build on, I absolutely agree with you, Wally. And just to build off that, we're working with the water district on Salt Spring. That's not a municipality; they are a water district, but they're serving a community. We're working with unincorporated communities. We're working with First Nations. So we're very much open to different forms of governance. We're not stuck on specifically on a municipal structure.
And I recall First Nations communities are eligible within this project?
Most certainly, yeah. We're working with lots across the country.
Because there's a new corporation in BC or in Saskatchewan, the First Nations Capital and Infrastructure Agency, which is doing the funding transfer from Ottawa to deliver services on the First Nations on the project services. I've made sure they're aware of the program.
Great. Thank you, Wally. Appreciate that. Just another question in the chat. When working on a project with an expert, is it a possibility to have a feasibility study as an output of this initiative? Or is it more the expert providing advice on how to move forward towards a feasibility study? I would say it is generally the latter. So we're not going generally full feasibility studies are a level of detail that we're generally not funded or prepared to deliver, but we can get you very close to that. So I think the example that you've outlined here on EV charging infrastructure, we would essentially be able to give you options and considerations that get you closer to a feasibility study for EV charging. Does that sound about right, Sadhu?
Yeah, I think it kind of gets into semantics at some point, but I agree with you. I mean, really what we'd be looking at is, okay, here are the options, the analysis, the costs, the pros and cons of different approaches. Yeah. So it would be a pretty thorough options analysis of how to achieve that in different ways you might be able to get to what you're trying to achieve.
So yeah, to that point, we have a couple of these types of projects. When we're doing renewable work, we look at rough order magnitude of costs compared to a baseline. We look at technical considerations, as well as payback periods that you can expect. So that level of work we are able to do. Okay. Any other questions in the room?
Before we start to close out, Matt, I think I just want to reiterate this program is part of a three tiers that HICC has got out, and the help desk is a really great resource if you're looking for different funding programs, different ways that that HICC can get information to you. Really recommend reaching out to them. And then also the ICLEI Insight tool is a really great one-stop shop to see what kind of issues you might have in your area and what kind of solutions there might be. So I just encourage people. It looks like Matt's putting those both in the chat, but that's those are really, it's kind of the three work really well together. So just worth checking those out.
Thank you, Sadhu. And we got a question about if the recording is going to be made available at the end of the session. Yes, the recording will be posted on our website, I believe. Yes, it will be posted on our website. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. Thank you, Mohammed from Dufferin County, for talking about your project and your experience. Thank you, Twyla from Associated Engineering, for joining us and highlighting the types of services that they're able to provide. Thank you, Sadhu, as always, for being a champion of this initiative. And everyone, if you have any questions, any submissions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. We have funds to deliver. We have targets to hit. So we'd love to talk to you about your project and how this initiative can help you. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.